Terrifying tales of haunted night drives. Discover the sinister secrets revealed in the dark. Sarah's heart pounded in her chest, echoing like a drum in the stillness of the night as she drove home from the diner. The familiar route through Maplewood was usually comforting, streetlights flickering overhead, casting eerie shadows of trees that swayed like ghostly figures in the wind. But tonight was different. Tonight, the air felt thick with something more sinister. Her tired eyes caught a glimpse of a missing person poster on a utility pole, the soft lamplight reading the words "Help Find Jenna" in bold letters. A chill swept through her, igniting whispers of dark tales circulating in her community about a predator lurking nearby. As she drove, unease settled in her gut, the weight of it almost unbearable. She glanced in her rearview mirror, and her breath hitched in her throat. A car was tailing her closely, headlights blaring like a predator's gaze. It shifted dangerously close, as if daring her to evade its pursuit. Her grip tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles turning white. Panic began to claw at her, a primal urge to flee igniting her instincts. "Just keep driving," she muttered to herself, her voice trembling as she reached for her phone. Tapping fingers failed her, each call met with indifference or vague assurances that everything was fine. Dread pooled in her stomach, deepening as she thought about Jenna, the girl on the poster. What if this was connected? What if this was the nightmare that had crawled from the shadows? Sarah's pulse quickened, each beat resonating louder than the tires humming against the asphalt. Ignoring the fading comfort of the familiar route, she took a sharp turn onto a deserted backroad. The car followed. Her heart raced, pounding like a caged animal. Thoughts spiraled, fear mixing with adrenaline as the headlights drew closer, an ever-looming specter of danger. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With every twist and turn in the desolate neighborhood, desperation surged within her. The shadows rushed past like a dark wave crashing down. The car behind her seemed relentless, a malicious hunter refusing to grant her escape. It loomed closer, the unknown driver barely visible, cloaked in darkness, a phantom of her worst fears. As she turned another corner, panic warped into frantic determination. Ties began to surface, intertwining the past with her present. The whispers of the missing girl, the trusted faces in her community. They mingled in her mind, forming a tangled web of suspicion. Who was this driver? Could they be connected to Jenna? The blood drained from her face as realization struck. People she once trusted became figures of uncertainty, their shadows cast much longer than their light. In a harrowing moment, she pushed the pedal down, turning her mundane night drive into a desperate race against the encroaching madness. As the world blurred past her window, she knew one thing for certain: the most dangerous secrets lingered not in the shadows of Maplewood but within those who wore their masks too well. Suddenly, her usual street came into view, familiar yet foreboding. What awaited her at the end? The suffocating darkness crept closer, closing in as she fought against panic. Could her home still be a sanctuary, or had she unknowingly driven into a trap? The question loomed, heavy and sinister, leaving an unsettling air of uncertainty as she sped toward the unknown. The familiar street now felt foreign, haunted by shadows that seemed to reach out as she passed. Sarah tried to shake the feeling, but the car behind her continued to follow, its headlights unyielding and blinding. Heart racing, she glanced back at the rearview mirror again. The silhouette of the driver remained obscured in darkness, but she could sense the intensity of their gaze, predatory, intent. Was it just her imagination, or had the car's lights grown brighter? Panic twisted tight in her chest. She pushed the accelerator further, the engine roaring as if matching her fear. Each turn seemed to tighten the noose around her throat. She could almost hear the footsteps of her own doom echoing in her ears, every shadow morphing into a figure waiting to pounce. She spotted an alley up ahead. With no other option, she swerved sharply, tires squealing. The alley was narrow, it offered little more than a brief respite, but it was all she had, if only to gather her thoughts. She could hear the creak of her car as she stopped abruptly, holding her breath in the heavy silence. She listened intently. The low rumble of the other car's engine grew closer, its headlights washing over the alley's entrance like a lighthouse scanning for wrecks. Sarah pressed her back against the driver's seat, trying to blend into the shadows that cocooned her. The car slowed outside, the engine stuttering into an eerie hush. What was happening? Was this a game? The thought sent a shiver down her spine. The driver couldn't know she was here, could they? She peered through the windshield, straining to see through the glaring light. Minutes passed, stretching into a suffocating silence. Just when she thought she might scream, the windshield wipers jolted to life, clearing moisture from the glass. Her eyes widened. Behind her, the headlights flickered in and out, sporadically illuminating the figure emerging from the car. A hooded form stepped into view, tall and foreboding, as if painted from the very essence of night. Sarah's heart felt like it was lodged in her throat. She couldn't see the face, but she could feel a sinister presence radiate off the stranger. This couldn't be the person from the posters, could it? She held her breath as the figure slowly turned, glancing this way and that, surveying the alley. A chill rolled over Sarah. They were looking for her. Instinct kicked in. She wouldn't wait to be hunted. Shaking with urgency, she reached for the gear shift, gripping it tightly. With one swift motion, she shifted into reverse, slamming her foot down on the gas pedal. The car shot backward, headlights blaring, the sound of tires screeching filling the confined space of the alley. But the moment she turned to face the mouth of it, the hooded stranger bolted forward, arms raised, the fabric of the hoodie flapping like the wings of a nightmarish bird. Then she saw it. Just before she could tear away into the street, the stranger's hand struck a glimmer of silver, something sharp, a weapon. In an instant, a wave of sheer terror gripped Sarah. She veered right, desperate to escape that looming shadow. But as she turned, the headlights from behind flared again, and for a split second, clarity struck her like a bolt of lightning. At that moment, the realization hit: this was no innocent emergency, it was a carefully orchestrated trap. As she sped down the street, pulse racing and tears pooling in her eyes, the thought gnawed at her: who would dare? Could they be someone she knew? Just as she approached the intersection, a figure loomed up ahead, blocking her path. Sarah slammed on the brakes, the world crashing to a halt, and her mind screamed 1,000 questions. What if the real danger wasn't just behind her, but also unfolding right before her eyes? Sarah's heart froze, caught in a vice as she faced the figure blocking her path. It was a woman, her dark hair cascading over her shoulders, eyes wide with fear that mirrored Sarah's own. She was raised above the ground like the gatekeeper of hell. "Please, help me!" the woman shouted, her hands shaking, as if the very act of pleading was an admission of her own vulnerability. But Sarah didn't know this woman. Panic twisted in her gut, sparking doubt. "Get out of the way!" she screamed, her voice cracking as urgency clawed at her throat. But the woman stood firm, eyes darting nervously to the shadows behind her. In that split second, the car behind Sarah rumbled back to life. The reappearance of the engine sent a jolt of fresh fear coursing through her veins. The headlights split the darkness, illuminating the alley in a harsh glow. The figure was still there, lurking, its intentions unreadable. "Run!" the woman cried, glancing back as if sensing a danger lurking deeper in the shadows. The words felt like a rope thrown into turbulent waters, a desperate lifeline thrown for Sarah to grab. She hesitated, weighing the choice between confronting the unknown threat behind her or risking whatever stood ahead. "Please!" the woman urged, stepping closer, the light casting ominous shapes on her features. "I'm not here to hurt you." But that plea only deepened Sarah's suspicion. What if she was dangerous? The world twisted and turned in a maze of choices, and each one felt like a wrong turn on a darkened road. Suddenly, the headlights from the pursuing car intensified. The engine roared like a beast ready to pounce. The hooded figure was moving, closing the distance, hands outstretched toward the woman now, who was blocking Sarah's escape. "Get in!" Sarah blurted, the words spilling out before she could think them through. The woman hesitated, a flicker of uncertainty seeping into her features. But the impending threat behind her left no room for hesitation. She darted to the passenger side, flinging the door open and diving in as Sarah's adrenaline-fueled instincts kicked in. "Go, go, go!" the woman shouted, her voice raw and urgent. With a roar, Sarah hit the gas, sending the car lurching forward. They barreled down the street, the tires squealing in protest against the asphalt. Her heart raced, the sound thrumming like a war drum in her ears, drowning out everything but the fear tightly woven into their escape. "Who was that?" Sarah demanded, her breath coming in short gasps as she stole a glance at her passenger. "I don't know," the woman replied, trembling, shifting in her seat. "But they're after me. They've been following me for days." "What do you mean?" Sarah snapped, her mind reeling. "How did you get involved in this?" Before the woman could respond, the headlights of the other car reappeared in her rearview mirror, more determined than before. Panic surged anew, shredding any semblance of sanity left. "We have to lose them," the woman cried, her eyes wild with fear. "They won't stop until they have me." Sarah's hands trembled on the steering wheel, the vehicle swaying slightly. "What do they want?" "Why you?" "They think I know something." "Something I did." A loud crack reverberated through the car as a flash of silver erupted alongside them. A moment later, a shard of glass exploded into the air, raining down like confetti of terror. "What was that?" Sarah shrieked, her legs jumping with instinctive fear, hitting the gas harder. The figure from the alley wasn't far behind, relentless in pursuit, urging them into a corner while gripping a glinting weapon. "Nobody's safe here," the woman whispered, her eyes wide. "We have to find somewhere to hide." It's only going to get worse. In that moment, it became clear the danger was more than just a split-second choice. Inescapable. They were both trapped, and the night had turned into a game of survival. Would Sarah's car be their sanctuary or their coffin? As they sped into the twilight, a chilling thought crossed her mind. Maybe the real threat wasn't the pursuer anymore, but the truths hiding underneath the woman's frantic facade. What secrets were worth dying for? Just then, she rounded a corner, and a sign ripped into view, a lone diner flickering in the darkness. Would this be their sanctuary or their doom? "Pull in there," the woman urged, her voice rising with fear. But the moment Sarah considered it, headlights loomed larger and larger behind them, like a predatory beast ready to strike. What awaited them inside could be just as deadly. Sarah's grip tightened around the steering wheel, knuckles white against the leather. The diner loomed ahead, its neon glow a false promise of safety, flickering like a hesitant heartbeat. The pursuing headlights glared through the rearview mirror, a haunting reminder of their imminent danger. "Go! Now!" the woman shouted, panic threading through her voice. With a quick swerve, Sarah pulled into the gravel lot, the tires crunching loudly against the surface. She cut the engine, and silence hung in the air, thick and suffocating. The diner windows glared like watchful eyes. It felt alive, the fluorescent light spilling out onto their car like a spotlight. "Do they know we're here?" Sarah whispered, glancing around as they both sank into the darkness of the front seats. "I don't know," the woman breathed, her heart racing, but her eyes flicked nervously to the road they had just left. They sat in suffocating stillness, the heaviness pressing in around them. Minutes felt like hours as the adrenaline began to fade, leaving behind a gnawing fear. Would that figure follow them here? Did they have the time to breathe? Just then, a figure darted past the diner's window. Sarah's heart raced as she squinted through the windshield. A man in a dirty leather jacket paused at the entrance, peering into the diner, his expression inscrutable. "Should we go inside?" Sarah's voice was barely audible. The woman shifted in her seat, biting her lip. Maybe if he's just some before she could finish, the man lunged forward, crashing through the diner door. Help! Someone's after us. The woman's voice erupted in a panic. In a flash, the man met their eyes through the glass. His face twisted into a grin, his teeth appearing sharp and deadly. That guy isn't just a customer, Sarah breathed, the dread creeping back in, curling around her like a snake. Suddenly, a shadow stepped up to the driver's side window. Sarah's breath caught in her throat as she turned, the man from the diner peering inside, his breath fogging the glass, eyes glinting with something darker. "I wouldn't stay in there too long," he slurred, a cruel smile stretching across his face. "They're hungry tonight." Her heart thundered in her chest, the weight of his words sinking deep into her gut. "What do you mean?" The others he stopped abruptly, as if catching himself, glancing back toward the diner. "You don't want to find out what they'll do when they smell fear." Before she could comprehend his warning, the headlights from the pursuing car swung into the lot, illuminating everything like a sinister spotlight. Heart racing, they both turned, their eyes wide as the vehicle rolled to a stop. The pursuer climbed out, cloaked in darkness, stalking towards them with a purpose. "Drive! Get out of here!" The woman screamed, lunging for the door. "Wait!" Sarah shouted, gripping her arm. "We can't just what if, trust me." The woman yelled, and Sarah saw the raw panic etched on her face. The man outside began moving closer, a knife glinting in his hand, a malevolent smile etched across his features. Then they were scrambling. The woman somehow flung open the door, pulling Sarah with her, both of them sprinting towards the diner. Every breath was a gasp, each step a rhythm of fear as the diner's door swung wide, offering a flicker of hope in the face of doom. Inside, the smell of stale coffee and grease hit like a punch. Patrons stared, their eyes vacant, as if time had etched themselves into the worn seats and chipped booths. "Help us!" Sarah cried as she and the woman burst through the door, heart pounding, ready for whatever else lay in wait. But as they turned back to see what they had escaped, the sight that met their eyes froze the blood in Sarah's veins. The man with the knife stood at the entrance, grinning wickedly, but it was the faces of the diners that truly chilled her, hollow eyes void of humanity, mouths twisted into grotesque smiles. "No one is safe from the truth," one of them whispered, the words dripping with malice. A searing dread filled the diner. Sarah's mind raced, grappling with the thought that perhaps this was a sanctuary turned into a trap. What lay hidden beneath the surface? And why did she feel they were not alone in this unfolding nightmare? What other horrors awaited them now that they were in the clutches of whoever lurked within these walls? The diner felt like a tomb. The air was saturated with fear and the weight of unspoken words. Sarah and the woman slid along the counter, desperately seeking refuge, but the stares from the patrons felt like invisible chains binding them. Cold sweat trickled down Sarah's back. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were being hunted. The man at the door didn't move. His knife glinted menacingly under the harsh overhead lights, a silent promise of the violence that lurked just beyond the threshold. The diner patrons remained eerily still, their smiles grotesque and unwavering, as if they were waiting for something terrible to unfold. "What do we do?" Sarah whispered, panic rising like bile in her throat. "Find a way out somewhere we can hide," the woman urged, her voice strained. She glanced back toward the exit, her eyes filled with terror. "Are you crazy? He'll see us." Sarah shot back, fear bubbling into anger. "Then we can't just stand here." The woman gripped Sarah's arm, her fingers digging in like claws. "We need to move." Suddenly, a buzzing noise filled the diner, reminiscent of a swarm of flies. The source came from the figure at the door as he twisted the knife in his hand, the sound screeching against the oppressive silence. "Get ready, lovebirds," he taunted, his voice dripping with mockery. "Dinner is about to be served." The diners shifted, their smiles widening, it felt like the collective groan of a hungry beast. Sarah's heart raced. How could these people look so wrong? Were they even human anymore? She felt sick, as if she was about to be swallowed whole. "Follow me," the woman hissed, already moving toward a narrow hallway. Sarah hesitated, but adrenaline pushed her feet into motion. They darted down the dim corridor, the walls damp and covered in peeling paint. Shadows stretched, clawing into the dim light. Each step echoed ominously, as if the diner was breathing down their necks. "Do you think there's a back door? A way out?" Sarah panted, urgency threading through her words. "Maybe just keep moving," the woman urged, leading the way. They came across a door at the end of the hallway, marked employees only, rusted and slightly ajar. Faint light spilled from within, hinting at a possible escape. The woman pushed it open cautiously, creaking loudly in protest. Inside, the kitchen was a chaos of abandoned pots and utensils, grease slicking every surface. Flickers of hope jumped in Sarah's chest. Maybe they could find a way out through the back. "We can hide in here," the woman breathed, her eyes darting around. But before Sarah could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hall behind them, heavy and slow. The lull of silence was shattered by the man's cruel laughter, resonant and hollow. "They think they can hide, how adorable." A shiver ran down Sarah's spine. Panic rose. They had no time. "Quick! Look for a door or a window," she urged, rummaging through a stack of boxes, but the room provided no immediate escape. She could sense the predator getting closer, drawing nearer with every breath. The woman's attention darted to the far corner, her eyes widening. There! A window! When they turned, a blood-curdling scream erupted from the front of the diner. They froze, hearts pounding as terror echoed through the walls. The sound morphed into chaos, screams and laughter intertwining in a symphony of horror. "What's happening?" Sarah's voice trembled. "We need to go now." The woman was already moving toward the window, fighting to pry it open, but it was stuck, refusing to budge. The footsteps grew louder, the menacing laughter closer still. They could feel the walls of the diner closing in, like a vice around them. "Come on, come on," the woman urged, panic etched across her face. The window creaked, finally giving way. But just as they turned to climb out, the door swung open, the man standing there with a wicked grin, a wave of darkness pouring in behind him. "Looks like dinner has arrived," he sneered. They were trapped. What would they do now that the true feast was about to begin? The echo of laughter filled the air, drowning out their screams as they stood frozen, teetering on the edge of hope and despair. And in the distance, shadows began to coil, waiting for the moment to strike. The man's grin widened, revealing teeth too sharp, too white against the encroaching darkness. It felt as if all the air had been sucked from the room, leaving them gasping. Sarah's breath quickened, falling in sync with her heavy heart. There was no escape now. The laughter from the patrons outside rolled in like a wave, drowning out any remaining thoughts of resistance. It felt electric, charged with hunger, with anticipation. Sarah shared a panicked glance with the woman, their eyes reflecting the primal fear that surged through them. Back up!" the woman yelled, but her voice trembled. They shuffled toward the far wall, pressed together as if united in their dread. The man took a slow step forward, each movement deliberate, like a predator savoring the moment before it pounces. The shadows around him seemed to swell and pulse. "Nice to see so many flavors in one spot," he taunted, his tone dripping with malice. "I could get used to this." Sarah's mind raced. She needed a plan, any plan, but panic muddled her thoughts. The room felt like it was shrinking, the oppressive walls closing in on her sanity. A heavy silence fell, broken only by the creaking of the kitchen's old machinery and the sinister whispers of the crowd outside. The woman's hand slipped into her pocket, and Sarah saw her fingers wrap around something small and metallic. A keychain? A knife? Whatever it was, it could be their only hope. On the count of 3 the woman whispered, eyes darting toward the man who now stood just a few feet away, knife glinting. Sarah nodded, her pulse quickening with the mounting tension. 1, 2, but before the woman could say 3, a blood-curdling scream tore through the diner once again, this time sharp and deadly. It wasn't just fear, it was anguish, despair etched into that sound, echoing like a death knell. The man paused, a flicker of annoyance crossing his features. What a racket. Can't you see we're trying to have a little dinner party? He turned his attention back to them, his eyes narrowing like a cat toying with its prey. Go! The woman suddenly screamed, lunging toward the man, weapon arm raised high just as Sarah pushed hard against the wall, willing it to give way. The wall, solid as stone, didn't budge. The woman's strike missed, only grazing the sleeve of his shirt, and the man's laughter filled the air once more, dark and rumbling. Nice try. He jeered, swinging the knife in a grotesque arc, fear tangled in Sarah's chest. They were losing precious seconds. In a flash of desperation, she glared at the woman. The window. The words spilled from her lips as the thought pierced through her panic. The woman glanced back, uncertainty clouding her face. It's too small. Better than this. Sarah shouted, her voice sharp like glass. With a wild lunge, she sprinted for the window, heart pounding in her ears. The woman followed as the man let out a furious howl, a sound torn from the depths of some unfathomable rage. They reached the window, both of them gripping the frame, faces pale with fear. But before they could climb through, the man was upon them, an arm outstretched, knife glinting like a comet. Not so fast. He bellowed, crashing against them. The world shifted as the knife arced overhead, and time slowed to an agonizing crawl. Sarah's mind clamored for escape, but it felt like they were caught in a deadly snare. An explosion of glass shattered the moment, a sudden, violent break. A new force surged into the kitchen, billowing shadows that engulfed the man in an instant, eclipsing his wicked laugh. What? Sarah gasped as the scene unfolded before her, a whirlwind of chaos and darkness. The shadows writhed and twisted, dragging the man away, whispering his name like a distant chant. Sarah blinked, dazed by the sudden turn. What just happened? But the woman didn't answer. Her eyes were wide as she pointed toward the chaotic swirl, fingers trembling. Out of the maelstrom, a figure emerged, cloaked and ethereal, a haunting presence that felt both ominous and inviting. As the corners of the diner melted into obscurity, Sarah realized they had unwittingly stepped into a far greater terror. Run! The woman screamed again, but even as they spun toward the window, the figure whispered an unearthly command, halting them in place. Stay with me. Their feet felt glued to the floor, trapped in an unseen force that bled fear into their very bones. And in that moment, they understood they were not the only hunted in this dark place. What would the shadows reveal next? The shadows pulsed, restless and hungry, alive with a malevolence that seeped into Sarah's skin. She could feel their icy fingers creeping up her spine, wrapping around her throat like a vice. Just as panic turned to despair, a dim light pierced through the obscurity. The haunting figure let out a low, melodic hum that echoed throughout the diner, reverberating in the silence that followed. Stay with me, it commanded again, its voice curling around them like smoke, blending fear with an unsettling comfort. Sarah's heart raced. She wanted to break free, to push through the weight of dread anchoring her down, but the shadows tightened their grip as the figure stepped closer. The woman shuddered. What do you want? She demanded, her voice shaking yet defiant. Her bravery felt thin, stretching under the pressure. I want to feast. The figure spoke softly, its face hidden in the folds of the cloak, but Sarah could feel its gaze boring into her. To taste the darkness that lingers in your hearts. The words ignited something primal in Sarah. A surge of survival instinct overwhelmed the paralyzing fear. She remembered the knife the woman had brandished moments before. We need to fight it. Sarah shouted, heart pounding so hard she thought it might break free. But the figure's eerie laughter swept through the room, chilling her resolve. You presume too much. But I do relish the struggle, the tug of war between life and death. As if on cue, the diner began to shift. Tables warped, and the walls pulsed like a living thing. Wooden slats buckled and groaned, merging in twisting patterns that made her stomach turn. The energy in the air thickened as the figure began to raise its arms, sweeping shadows across the room like a conductor of a sinister orchestra. Forget your weapons. I offer you a choice, it hummed, spreading its arms wide. Join me in blissful oblivion or resist and meet your doom. Blissful oblivion? You mean death. The woman spat, her resolve formatting in the heat of fear. The figure's laughter echoed, a haunting melody that sent tremors through Sarah's limbs. Death or something far worse. A cold sweat dripped down Sarah's back. The laughter from the patrons outside had morphed, blending into a cacophony of shrieks and whispers, warped and frayed at the edges. They were calling, they were begging, or were they crying for help? The line between the living and the dead blurred. Can't you hear them? The figure whispered, drawing closer, its presence suffocating. They too had choices and they chose poorly. Sarah looked back toward the window, the only fracture in the madness, a hint of light shining through the broken glass. Let us go. She screamed, sensing their fleeting chance. But the shadows twisted with a ferocity that pulled them back, drowning out her voice. A sudden wave of warmth coursed through her veins, an unexpected warmth in the chill of despair. She felt a flicker of courage. We can't give in. Not now. Then, without warning, she lunged forward. Her hands grasped at the figure's cloak, pulling at the darkness, trying to rip it apart. The woman joined in, desperation fueling their every move. Let go. The figure hissed, eyes flaring with emerald rage. The shadows writhing around them screamed pained whispers swirling into a chaotic hurricane. Sarah's heart faltered, doubt creeping back in. They were in too deep. Just as despair loomed large, a bright light erupted from their combined struggle, a flash so brilliant it pierced through the suffocating darkness. The figure hissed and recoiled as if scalded. Foolish mortals. It shrieked, the shadows melting back from the sudden blaze. For a brief moment, clarity washed over Sarah. Now! The window! She yelled, pushing her companion towards the fragile frame. With renewed vigor, they dove toward salvation. Yet as they escaped, the shadows howled in fury, the figure lashing out one last time. Your fate is not yet sealed. The diner's exterior warped around them, bending like fabric as they broke free. Terror surged through Sarah as she hit the ground, breathing in the cool night air, but dread trailed behind them like a shadow of its own. What have we unleashed? Sarah gasped, heart racing. As they stumbled away from the diner, the echoes of that otherworldly laughter followed them, slipping through the night air like smoke. It wasn't over. They had escaped the grasp of one terror, but what new horrors lurked just beyond the shadows? And as they ran into the night, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was hunting them now, something drawn to the light they both carried. Adrenaline still surged in Sarah's veins as they ran, the weight of fear anchoring them down like chains. They dashed down a desolate street, the moonlight casting ghostly shapes around them. She turned to look back, but only shadows met her eyes. The diner seemed to shiver and distort behind them, as if it were alive and waiting for their return. Do you think it followed us? The woman panted, glancing around nervously. Her eyes, wide with panic, reflected the dim glow of the streetlight like mirrors reflecting horror. It has to be, Sarah replied, breathless. Her heart was racing, each beat a drum of survival. We need to keep moving. But the further they went, the more the air thickened. It felt as if the very surroundings were closing in, holding its breath in anticipation. A chill swept over her as dusk deepened into night. Suddenly, a low, rumbling growl echoed down the street, ricocheting off the walls. It clawed at her insides, a primal fear wrapping around her throat like that invisible grip from before. The sound came from behind a wolf, tiger, or something far worse. "Did you hear that?" Sarah gasped, stopping dead in her tracks. "Keep going." The woman tugged on her arm, urgency lacing her voice. Sarah hurried after her, but the growl had only intensified, morphing into a haunting whisper that curled around them like smoke. "Turn back, come back," it called, dragging at the edges of her sanity. "No, no," Sarah shook her head violently. "We can't go back." But the whispers became a chorus, taunting, mocking. Memories of the diner crept back, the figure's eyes, the shadows that swirled like phantoms, and the warmth that flickered for a brief moment like a candle about to be snuffed out. Their pace quickened, but the ground began to tremble. Leaves rustled ominously, and a chill swept through the air like a warning. The woman stumbled. "Sarah, look!" Ahead, a flickering light appeared amid dense trees lining the street. It pulsed erratically, casting elongated shadows that writhed and twisted as if animated by invisible fingers. "Is it another trap?" The woman hesitated, flashing her gaze from Sarah to the eerie glow. "I don't think we have a choice." Sarah took a deep breath, then started toward the light. They needed answers, whether they came from darkness or not. As they approached, the glow solidified into a figure hunched, gnarled, and cloaked in a cloak even darker than night. For a moment, Sarah's heart dropped. Fear threatened to engulf her once more. "What do you want?" she called, her voice trembling not with fear this time, but defiance. The figure lifted its head, revealing a face slightly illuminated, a hollow visage, eyes like dim embers smoldering in the dark. "I know why you ran," it croaked, voice like gravel scraping against stone. "You may have escaped the abyss, but it has not forgotten you." "What do you mean?" the woman stammered, stepping back. "Everything you fear has a way of coming back, and this time, it will take you." With that, the cloaked figure raised a skeletal hand, and the shadows coalesced around it, rushing forward like a predatory wave. "No!" Sarah screamed, her heart pounding furiously as she pushed the woman aside, ready to confront whatever horror awaited them. But in that moment, a blinding flash erupted from the figure, illuminating the darkness. Everything went white. When visibility returned, they stood in a vast expanse, a distorted dimension filled with swirling fog and flickering lights flickering like distant stars. The ground felt alive, vibrating with an unseen energy. Where are we?" the woman gasped. Before Sarah could answer, the whispers returned, more urgent, more frantic. Join us in the eternal shadows." A shiver crawled down Sarah's spine. There was no safe ground here, no end to the fear. As they turned to escape, the figure loomed once more from the fog, grinning like the devil himself and beckoning them closer. "Your light is but a flicker and I will snuff it out." Breath caught in her throat. Sarah realized this was just the beginning. They had only stumbled into a deeper darkness, one that wanted to devour them whole. "What do we do?" she whispered, panic surging anew as they backed into the awaiting shadows. But the fog thickened, swirling around them, blinding them to all but darkness. And then, a sudden silence fell. What would it take to escape this abyss? What sacrifices lay ahead in the hunt for survival? The silence pressed in like a weight, suffocating and heavy. Sarah felt as if the very ground were pulsing beneath her, alive and watching. She strained against the oppressive fog, desperately seeking the woman beside her. "Stay close," she urged, but her voice was swallowed by the thick, swirling mist. "Sarah?" The woman's voice trembled, echoing in the emptiness. "Where are you?" "Here," Sarah shouted, reaching out into the void. She felt panic rising, clawing at her throat. "We need to find a way out." With each passing second, the shadows deepened around them, the air growing colder. The whispers wove through the fog, wrapping around Sarah like chains. When she turned, the figure was again looming close, the hollow eyes fixed upon her, a grin stretched across its face. Do you see? You're already lost, it croaked. Get away from us. She screamed, lifting her hands as if that alone could push away the terror. But with each inflection of the creature's voice, the fog thickened. A feeling of despair wrapped around her heart, tightening like a noose. The shadows twisted, coiling like snakes, choking the light from their world. Then Sarah remembered the warmth of the diner, the fleeting flicker of hope. What if we recall our light? She murmured, glancing at the woman. What if we remember the warmth we felt? Will it work? The woman's gaze flickered with doubt. It has to, Sarah responded, her mind racing with possibilities. She steeled her resolve. Close your eyes. Remember the diner, the comfort we felt. She struggled to pull forth that moment, focusing on the laughter and the smell of coffee, a nostalgic beacon in their current hell. As if sensing their intent, the figure lurched forward, shadows expanding like a tidal wave. You can't escape. It howled, voice now a cacophony of fury. Just hold on. Sarah shouted, grasping the woman's hand tightly. Suddenly, in the darkness, she sensed something stirring, the faintest glow beginning to emerge from their clasped hands. With each heartbeat, the flicker grew stronger, illuminating their surroundings. The shadows hissed, recoiling from the burgeoning light. We're doing it. Keep thinking of the warmth. But the figure thrashed, summoning an avalanche of darkness. You cannot defy me. It screamed, its voice distorting in rage. The dim light began to pulse rhythmically, pushing back against the shadows in desperate waves. It's working. Just a little more. The woman's breath hitched. Sarah, look. Amidst the shadows, there was movement, figures draped in the same cloak, emerging from the fog, their hollow eyes joining the chorus of whispers, join us, no. Sarah yelled, heart racing. We are not yours. The glow reached a fever pitch as fear collided with hope. They felt the surge of energy flowing through them, growing, igniting every fiber of their being. The light pulsed fiercely against the suffocating shadows, illuminating the grotesque faces of the cloaked figures. In an instant, the swirling fog began to retract, revealing a path ahead, dim but visible. Run! With every ounce of power within her, Sarah propelled herself forward, dragging the woman alongside. But before they could dash down the clearing, the skeletal hand of the dark figure shot out. You think you can escape? Your roots are entwined in this darkness. Just then, tethered by the force of the fading light, they halted, caught in the grip of fate. Shadows distorted, swirling violently, reaching for them like hungry claws. Sarah! The woman screamed, despair flashing in her eyes. With the last of their strength, they propelled themselves toward the glimmer, the shadows lunging behind. But something snapped, the darkness erupted like a pack of wolves, teeth bared, hungry for their flesh. Sarah felt cold fingers brushing against her back, whispering promises of despair. Then, just before they reached the edge of the light, Sarah glanced back. In that instant, she understood, the abyss wasn't just around them, it was part of them. As they plunged into the light, Sarah's heart raced with fear and dread. What awaited them on the other side? Would they finally escape, or had they merely traded one nightmare for another? The path stretched ahead, but the air crackled with uncertainty. And then, just ahead, shadows began to slither back, seeking the warmth they had cast aside. Could they ever really outrun what they had awakened? The light burst around them, and Sarah felt as if she were being reborn. All the fears of the night, the shadows, the sinister laughter, and the figure cloaked in darkness seemed to implore her to turn back. But she pressed on, her heart hammering in her chest, fueled by a desperate will to survive. As the blinding brightness faded, clarity washed over her. She and the woman stood in an empty field, light spilling across green grasses like a blanket greeting the dawn. The air was clean, fresh, free of the stench of fear and decay that had permeated the diner. They were safe for now. What just happened? The woman gasped, collapsing to her knees, finally allowing herself to breathe. Is it over? I think so, Sarah replied, her voice trembling. The memories of the diner still clawed at her mind, but the sunlight felt tangible, sparking something alive inside her, a flicker of hope. She reached down, grabbing the woman's arm and helping her back to her feet. We need to keep moving. But the woman shook her head, tears spilling from her eyes. I can't go back there. Not ever again. The raw expression of fear twisted Sarah's heart. I know, but we can't let it win. We have to find a way to make sure it doesn't come after us again. The woman looked into Sarah's eyes, and in that moment, they shared a profound understanding. They had both danced with darkness, but in their struggle, they had found the light within themselves. Just as they began to step forward, the ground trembled. A low rumble echoed in the distance, the familiar growls returning. Panic clawed at Sarah's chest again, a voice whispering dread. It's looking for us. I can't do this, the woman breathed, stepping back. No. Sarah shouted, grounding her feet. You can. We both can. We just have to face it. What doesn't kill us makes us stronger, right? We need to confront the truth behind those shadows. The woman hesitated, searching for conviction in Sarah's voice. All right, she finally whispered, the fire of determination sparking in her eyes. But what are we going to do? Together, Sarah said, taking a deep breath. We focus on the light we found inside. We need to expose whatever truth lingers in the darkness. As they walked hand in hand, the echoes of their fears roared in tandem with the whispers around them. Together, they embraced the unknown, approaching the edge of their previous reality, the diner. The light surrounded them as they neared the building, standing again at that threshold between dread and truth. The diner stood as it had before, shadows lingering like unwelcome guests, wrought with the promise of terror. But now the atmosphere felt different, a sense of calm warping the chill in the air. It's just a building, Sarah murmured, half to herself. Just a building, the woman echoed, finding strength in the words. With determination, they stepped inside, the door creaking open to reveal the familiar scents of coffee and fried food, sweet and nostalgic. But the patrons were all there, their smiles still grotesque, teeth sharp and ready. The man with the knife stood at the entrance, a wicked grin fixed across his face. Welcome back. You thought you could escape, he taunted, his malicious glee resonating off the walls. Stop. Sarah shouted, her voice unwavering. The laughter from the diners surged in a chorus of hunger, but just as the terror of the shadows deepened, the warmth inside both Sarah and the woman ignited anew. They felt the flicker of light once more. We've learned from this, the woman said, her voice rising, emboldened. This isn't our end, it's just the beginning for us. In that moment, the light they summoned was a beacon, splintering through the darkness surrounding them. It illuminated the patrons, the menacing grins faltering, shadows beginning to retreat. You're not in control anymore. Sarah shouted, throwing her hands forward, and the shadows shrieked in pain. With a furious determination, she and the woman stepped forward, unleashing their combined light, pushing back the shadows, the sinister knife, everything that tried to confine them. As they advanced, the light grew in intensity, wrapping around them like fire, drowning out the darkness. What is happening? The man with the knife screamed, eyes wide with disbelief, but they pressed on, a powerful surge coursing through them. I choose my truth. Sarah roared, lighting the path forward. The world trembled around them, the shadows howling in agony as they lost their grasp. The diner began to dissolve, fading into the light like a mirage, collapsing in on itself. They felt it, the chains of darkness and fear shattered around them, and as the diner exploded into 1,000 fragments, Sarah and the woman erupted into laughter, freedom streaming from their mouths like sweet nectar. No more light, no more darkness. They proclaimed together, hand in hand, leaping into the unknown, and as the ashes of that haunted place faded behind them, Sarah understood, their story wasn't one of terror. It was a journey of reclaiming their light. With courage burning bright, they stepped into the next chapter, one filled with the promise of redemption and new beginnings, for they had faced the shadows and emerged stronger. That night drive that feared the dark now glimmered with possibility and hope, but as they ventured forward, whispers still lingered on the wind, a reminder of the abyss. They knew, they had escaped, but the shadows would always be watching. So, dear friends, if you've enjoyed this tale, you need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach more people. Flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. And for the love of all, instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Your support means everything in this wild ride through the darkness.